Well, let us dive headfirst into the D.U.F.F. So, the story to the D.U.F.F. is that Bianca, who is a typical nerdy teenager, she's a film nerd, much like myself. She discovers that she is the D.U.F.F. within her particular group of friends. D.U.F.F. standing for Designated Ugly Fat Friend. She is distraught to learn about this, and she tries to rectify the situation by taking the bull by the horns and at some point rebelling against it, some point conforming to it, and watch the rest of the movie to find out what happens. Rather difficult to try and talk about it, but I'll move on. Right. So the movie stars Mae Whitman, who I have to say does a perfectly fine job within this movie. This is teen comedy movie. I have to say, put my hands up here and now and say that I'm not the target audience for this. This movie is very plainly aimed at teenage girls. I am neither one of those things, but... but what I'll say to that is that when it comes... I've always found the idea of a target audience for just about anything to be odd, because if the product is good, it doesn't matter who the target audience is, because it'll transcend those boundaries. Like, a few weeks ago, we had the Shaun the Sheep movie, a movie which is aimed at preschool children, but is probably one of the best movies that I've seen this year. Now, I have to say that I am fairly disappointed in this movie, and I'm quite sad to say that. Going into this movie, I knew nothing about it. I had a vague idea that it would be a teenage girl comedy movie, but right at the very beginning of this movie, there is a little voiceover by our lead character, and she says how high school has changed to how it was maybe when you were there. Now the jocks are playing video games, all the self-confident high school princesses are all taking anxiety medication, and about how all the nerds are now running the world. And it's at that point you think to yourself, so this is going to be a high school teen comedy movie which is going to play about with stereotypes. It's really going to play about with them and really manipulate them and to show them in a new light. And sadly it doesn't. This is a very cliched teenage comedy movie in almost every way, shape and form. Now, one of the things, like I said in the little plot synopsis to this is that our lead character is a film nerd, much like myself. She enjoys watching obscure horror movies. There's a brief clip of Lucio Fulci's Zombie. She even has a poster to it on the background, as well as posters for Murders in the Rue Morgue and Maniac, and I think there's even a Trauma movie poster at some point. And sadly, despite her being a more contemporary kind of nerdy character, there's nothing about her character which feels contemporary, which I'm sad to say about, because she should be the kind of person that, despite the fact that she's a teenage girl, that she's in a 21st century teenage comedy movie, it's a character I should identify with. But sadly I don't. One of the weird things is that despite the fact she has some fairly obscure horror movie posters on her wall, she makes pop culture film references that most people would probably get anyway. But of course, not most teenagers, because most teenagers these days don't know anything about Vincent Price or Bela Lugosi. Ho! I am surprised. Her character in writing is just typical nerdy character, awkward, even though her physical performance doesn't make her seem nerdy. She's not even ugly, to be quite honest with you. She isn't, and I would at least be willing to go with that if maybe she was hunched over a bit, she slouched about as she walks, and the closest thing that you get to any kind of ugliness is that when they're doing the slow motion walk up to the camera, you see her two glamorous friends, and you see her lumbering about with a backpack on trying to stifle a burp, and that's the closest thing to any kind of ugliness you get with the character. I am really, really disappointed, because everything about this movie should be a movie I like, one that plays with cliches and one that plays with stereotypes, with a character who should be some way identifiable to me. But sadly, it isn't. It's a fairly unremarkable movie, which I'm sad to say. I feel as though I should like this movie because it has all the elements to what I would find to be a fairly interesting, at the very least, teen comedy movie, but sadly it isn't. There's nothing about it which feels universal. Like I say, this is a movie which is aimed at teenagers, but it doesn't matter if it's aimed at teenagers, because if it's good, it should be universal. People who maybe have never been to university in 20, 30 years can at least identify with some of the tropes and the characters, but for my money, I can't, even though I left high school about 7 or so years ago. So I am just astounded by it. And the way that they write a lot of the teenage characters feels very awkward. It feels like something a 30 or 40-year-old would write, for crying out loud. I'm just sad to say I didn't like it. I wanted to like it. I really did. I have to say, though, in the film's defence, I did see this in a cinema where the target audience was there, and they seemed to like it in at least a fairly fleeting way. They seemed more to laugh at Ken Jeong more than anything else, and the weird noises he made, so people laughed at that. The situational stuff, not so much, which is a shame, because every now and again it can do something a little bit clever, and sadly it's not clever enough. I'm sad to say I didn't like it. I wanted to like it. I thought I was going to hate it. I got to the first 5 minutes and thought I was going to like it, and at the end of it I just find it fairly unremarkable. It feels at worst like a TV movie. I'd say that it should have been a movie that does play a bit more with the cliches that we had with high school comedy movies, because you watch them going all the way back to the 50s or even the 40s. Comedies set in high schools have followed the same kind of formula with the same kind of cliched characters: the dumb jock, the bumbling nerd, the glamorous prima donna princess character. And bar a short little monologue at the very beginning of the movie, they never do anything with that, and then the movie just falls into the same cliches that we've seen time and time again. There's nothing about it which I identify with, not even in a nostalgic way, which I'm sad to say. And once again, there's bits of dialogue which don't feel like a teenager today would say them, which is odd, because it's a teenage movie. Teenagers should sound like teenagers, but they don't. The writers of this movie seemingly think that so long as they reference a bunch of social networking sites, that's going to suffice. But it doesn't. It really, really doesn't.